Ray, so good to see you. Likewise. Now you're in the head tip now.
Oh, no.
I don't know that anymore. Oh, Walter. How you been, Glenn?
Good. You?
I'm good.
Got a lot going on.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah. Tons of work. Tons of work. How's summer treating you here? You good?
Yeah. I mean, it's hot. It's the least favorite time of
Yeah.
hot and humid.
Yeah. Oh, you get humidity here.
Is it on the bottom? Yeah.
I'm on. All right. It's 1 o'clock, and so I'd like to go ahead and let's get started here. Welcome. I know that's supposed to be the first slide up here is welcome. Walter won't be joining us today. He's got a nasty cold or something, so he won't be here. With him are the name badges. So we'll just go around and we'll just quickly introduce ourselves and so that everybody knows who we're talking to, and we'll get started.
Said it's on. Janet Jensen.
Sean Kreiderman, Board Secretary.
Brad Jones.
I'm Dan Nordhill.
I got one that's working. Ray Kuhn, Assistant General Manager.
I'm Glenn Seligman with the McMahon Group. I'm the director of our architecture department.
Kevin Carroll with the McMahon Group, Vice President of Club and Community Consulting.
Matt Campick, the Board President.
Cindy McAlvin.
Denise Anthony. Penny Bartley.
Thank you. Again, welcome to the August session for the Facilities Task Force. I know Glenn was up on the screen a minute ago, but there he is. Success. Success. Minor details. All right. Okay. Let's go to the next slide then. So we've introduced ourselves. Want to go back through, and a lot of the slides will look similar. They're almost becoming like boilerplate in terms of the initial ones. But a good time to review what our tasks are. We did incorporate a bunch of the comments from the task force last month. And we're going to go beyond, whoop, you just got wiped out. We are Let's see if this will work here. Okay. Okay, so, again, we'll spend the next couple hours going through the slide deck. Task force members, you're really struggling here. The task force members, please feel free to stop Glenn as we're going through now. If you see something that you've got a question about, rather than holding questions now, I think now's a good time as we're going through to have that interaction. At the end of the 2 hours, we'll kick Glenn and Kevin out, and we'll perform a little exercise in priority setting, and then we'll get on to the community comments. So, again, this is almost boilerplate at this point. You know, we need to have a master plan. It's critical for our future as a community, and it really establishes what the next decade looks like. I think it's a good point to remind folks. It's a master plan. It's not an execution plan. Any project we talk about today, again, will require a whole separate project team. So all we're really trying to do is to protect space and make sure that we don't go down a path that's going to cost us as a community money to go back and change in the future. And again, this is a living document, and it's about as firm as dried mud. So if you add water again, it'll get soft and move again. And Glenn, you're really having a tough time. It's not me, okay, it's not you, okay. So again, our objectives, we started with a check mark on it, analyze what's important. We've done that. We create this committee. We're in the middle of developing this master plan. That's the conversations that are going on now. And then I put a check mark by the develop a tour, because we've been on a tour of the facility. And then, of course, we need to continue to maintain our current facilities while we're doing this evaluation and future boards. So we're really guiding future boards. Okay. Ad lib. Oh, I'm not real good at ad lib, but that's okay. Despite having that 20 minutes ahead of time, a challenge. While we're at it, our next meeting will be September 17th, and followed by a meeting after that on October 22nd. And that should be on your calendars already. I don't sing and I don't dance, I'm sorry. Ray, you're up. Keep going. Next slide. Okay, next slide. So our planning steps, again, we talk about what we need or what are issues or what are desires, develop the options. Again, boilerplate, you've seen this slide before. And then at the end, we'll be presenting to the board. And then basically at that point, it becomes a board tool for the future. Next slide. Again, you've seen this slide. It speaks to the criticality of having a master plan for the long term for our community. And it helps future boards establish where we need to be going or not going, and really gives us also that opportunity that if there's some low-hanging fruit, that we can grab those along the way. But continuity of direction, as you'll all acknowledge, is the real key here. Okay? Again, we talked future presentations. We can go ahead and move on. Next slide. So, as I said before, we'll take the first couple hours here and we'll use the McMahon group, Kevin and Glenn, and then after we dismiss them, we'll have a quick exercise on priorities. So the board is in the process. How many times do I do this? Okay. The board's been actively producing a 5-year budget plan and a 10-year budget plan. This is typically Matt's slide. The big hurdle, of course, is the renovation of the golf course in 29. That's where the big dollars initially start. And then, so the work we're really looking at is for the most part, work that's after that major expenditure. But again, future boards, challenges, and considerations. Next. All right. Glenn, you're up. Do you want this?
So we talked about this a little bit last time, and it's the whole idea of different stratums of community. Communities can be, like your community is, quite down at one end of this continuum, and that means, and it's basically at what I call the nuclear end, where each individual facility around the community offers virtually every activity that the community offers. So you have swimming and tennis and dining or some other activity at each our fitness at each individual outlet around the community. So we have that, for example, here at Desert View, we have swimming and fitness and library and tennis and obviously some additional facilities which you wouldn't duplicate, like this theater. And then you duplicate those facilities again just up the road at Mountain View Clubhouse, where you have tennis and swimming and fitness, and obviously golf is there, and dining is there. And then you reduplicate those facilities yet again and have swimming and fitness and tennis and golf at the preserve. And being that your community is somewhat spread out, that somewhat makes sense. But when you have a facility that's more nuclear, you would expect higher operating costs. And so things that we could do to push it down towards the other end might help us with operating cost in the long term versus having to duplicate all of the facilities at each individual place. So that's something that we've been thinking about a lot as we've been doing this and trying to find ways of potentially making that happen. So then on this slide, you're seeing a overall map, and you'll see that in the center of this map, we have in the white circle, Saddlebrook 1, which is a much more focused kind of community, right? They have one aspect of much of these elements, whereas we at Saddlebrook 2 have elements duplicated all over the map. And so as we're thinking about that, you can sort of see in our blue boxes, we have the golf maintenance facility, the Desert View facility down here at this end. So this is the golf maintenance facility. This is the Desert View where we are. This is the Mountain View facility, which has the arts and other facilities related to that, the pool and the golf. We have the pickleball facility here, Saddlebrook 1 in the middle of everything. Then we have the Preserve Golf Clubs up at the top of the map here. And then the golf maintenance facility that primarily deals with the Preserve course. This primarily deals with the Mountain View course and the community CAMs of this facility. Hello, okay. It's sort of cutting out there a couple times. Also shown on this map are a couple of additional things. One is we sort of have identified several of the trails which are identified on your map. So we have the clubhouse, the preserve, and the preserve. And those are all sort of illustrated on here. There was an additional nature trail that somebody brought to our attention that is this yellow trail. And then in addition to that, there seems like there could be opportunities within this green circle for developing more trails around the golf course because there's significant green space, or natural space anyway, that's around these facilities. And I took a bit of a tour of that space, and it seems like that's an obvious, first of all, relatively centrally located place that you could get some more trails as a part of the thing. So we've just identified that as area to study for future nature trails. Next slide. This is an overall aerial view of the Mountain View facility as it is today, more or less. It was an aerial picture taken sometime in the last couple of years. And you can see, obviously, we have this is during the construction of the 9 to 10 trail that's now complete. So you can see that, and it doesn't have that entire new patio complete on this plan either. But other than that, it's pretty accurate in terms of showing the cart parking, the pool, the centralized facility for now the golf shop and the Rincon room and the meeting rooms and the dance studio and all that kind of stuff. It's in there. This is the golf cart queuing corral that's doesn't show the roof over it, but there's a roof over that, and there's a solar pavilion over a piece of this as well. And then our 5 tennis courts at this site, so fitness, pool, tennis, all duplicative, and dining and golf, so all facilities that you have other places on site as well. Here's our centralized arts and crafts and admin structure, and then our main Mountain View clubhouse with our ballroom and our a la carte dining operation. And then it's all of the parking obviously wraps around it. One thing is our main entries off the street are 3, and then a service entry that comes in up this way. So everybody's sort of located. This is 9 green, practice green, and 10T is over here. So next slide. So this is our consideration of what we might do now at Mountain View. And what we're going to show you here is we'll have a blow up. This is an overall view, and then we'll blow up each individual place. You'll see later that we're suggesting removing the tennis courts at Desert View. And this is getting us away from having duplicate facilities everywhere a little bit. And in order to do that, we said there was a lot of comments back on the last plan that we don't need, we don't want to have elevated tennis courts. We don't want to have parking under tennis courts here at this Desert View site. And we only need 3 tennis courts here at the Desert View site, which somewhat matches with the tennis courts that you have at the preserve. And so taking that to heart and thinking about, well, ways that we could adjust the plan, we're showing now having 8 tennis courts rather than 5 here and 3 at Desert, or 5 at Mountain View and 3 at Desert View. We're now going to show 8 tennis courts total, all at Mountain View. So that's a change, and we'll get into that. And then we'll have basically just of the same areas. Everything that's shaded in here is showing new construction. So new construction at the admin building and the arts and crafts building, new additions to the clubhouse here and here, and you can sort of see those things. And then there's landscape lawns, and we're going to blow up on each area of this and talk about it in more detail. But I think it's good to realize anything that has this sort of peach shade is some sort of new addition to an existing structure. And what we're saying by saying that, really, everybody, is that we don't feel like, as we look at the structure, look at the programmatic needs of the community and what you have, that this is a these facilities are so inadequate that we need to be torn down and rebuilt. Rather than doing that, we're saying to you, with some strategic additions and some interior renovations, these facilities can last us for the long term of 20 or 30 or more years and continue to serve the community and meet the programmatic needs that we've developed here as a group. It doesn't seem like there's any aspect of this that is like a total scrape, and we're not going to show you that at any of the facilities. They're all some sort of internal renovation and strategic addition plans rather than blow it all up and start over again. At the same time, these are not like a very simple kind of solutions either, because there's none of them are really completely adequate in their existing footprint to do what we're trying to do. And so that's why we have additions to the buildings, to try to expand them in such a way that is responsible, makes sense architecturally, and will work with the construction of the buildings and that kind of thing, and then also provide the needs that we have. So we have, again, the golf and swimming at the top of the page up here, the tennis in the middle, the arts and crafts, and the clubhouse. Let's go to the next slide. My red dot is dying, but you can see up here, this is basically, let's go back one slide, sorry. I'd forgotten about, one of the things that we are studying here is this whole issue of the approximate size of existing maintenance centers. So there's a lot of discussion about what are we going to do with maintenance center, community maintenance and golf course maintenance. And one of the options was, well, how much room do we have up on the hillside behind the clubhouse? And so what I've shown you here, and this is diagrammatic at this point, it's just showing you an approximate area and how much space things take relative to what kind of space you have here. So this is showing you a graphic image or of aerial photo of the hillside that you have, of the hill that you have today that you could work with behind the clubhouse. And in the magenta color here, it's the approximate size of the existing maintenance area, 1 acre. So this, if you took the existing Mountain View site that you have today, which is approximately 1 acre, and laid that just graphically over the top of this map, you can see that that's about a 1 acre site. And then I know from experience and having done a lot of these kinds of facilities over the years, that something that would be probably more appropriate to what you need for running a course and a community maintenance center and parking and all the things that you would need within that facility. You might need as much as 2.5 acres. We've designed a number of these that sort of get to that size. And so this green box sort of shows a 2.5 acre site on the hillside. So somewhere between those two would be likely where you would land with any kind of new facility on this site. Now this facility, what we're showing here is what we're not showing here is any kind of design for this. So it's just a box that shows how much acreage it is on the hillside. So obviously, you might get into it and say, well, we need this to be more shaped to the hillside, and this might be more of a curve and all that kind of stuff. But at this point, we're not getting into that level of planning. We're getting into where do we have space around our campus, around our community, where we could house this kind of space to serve the needs that we have with our maintenance facilities. And this would give us the ability to house a complete maintenance facility on this site, which would serve Mountain View and CAM for the entire community as a central maintenance center. And then after you look at that, when you would look at that, you would say, well, what will we do with those other maintenance sites that we already have? And those could either be satellite facilities or we'd find other uses. And that might affect how big you would ultimately make this. All of that stuff is to be determined, right? We're not ready to determine any of that yet, but this gives us an idea visually about what that is. Let's look at the next slide. On this slide, you can see now that we have the exact same thing that I was showing you on the other slide, but it flattens it out more into a plan. So we've just eliminated the aerial photo, and it just gives it a more graphic plan. In what we're doing here, we're showing some expanded parking into the hillside because we're taking some parking for the tennis center, and we're rebuilding all of the tennis shelters and platforms and tennis pavilions. So that's a whole tennis center. Let's go to the next slide. So this is a blow up again of the golf building, and then as a part of that golf building, we talked about this last time. It doesn't have a lot of traction, but I think it has a place in the plan, which is to have some simulators and a lounge as a part of that existing building. The simulators would be under the existing porch roof that you have today there, so it doesn't really anticipate any additional roof on the site to speak of. It just sort of fits under the additional roof and becomes additional footprint of enclosed space within the building. Let's go to the next slide. On this one, we show now the new tennis center, and the new tennis center would include a tennis building, reallocation of parking. You can see the green lines here show new sidewalks and new parking. The dashed lines show where existing facilities are, so you might have a curb there or an existing tennis court sort of sits in this area. And basically what we've done is reallocated all the space where the tennis courts are today to get 4 sets of 2 courts to get the 8 courts. And so you get a whole new tennis center out of the deal. The other thing that we're doing here, and I know there was a lot of input back on, well, we don't want to have a 2-story facility here at the club. And at the same time, I wanted to challenge you back on that a little bit and say, well, if you don't have a 2-story space, we're either going to have to find more space around the facility, like we're talking about up here on the hillside for more maintenance facilities, or we're going to have to take parking or something else to get to our goal of basically doubling the size of arts and crafts expansion and office optimization and all the things that we would do in an ultimate 2-story facility. Ultimately, we need to have a map location for how would we double the size of our existing arts and crafts and admin structure. Now, Dan and I have been talking about this a little bit offline as we were getting ready for the meeting, and he points out rightly that potentially some of the clubhouse maintenance or internal building maintenance, which takes up about a 2,000 square foot space or less in this building, could potentially move into a community maintenance facility if it was close enough. And the same thing, a large number of these parking spaces that exist today are in support of our maintenance operation, and so those could get relocated as well. So there's all kinds of opportunity within a diagram like this to think, well, you could do different things. I think my takeaway from what you said and why I'm sort of challenging you back on it is you can easily see to double the size of that is going to take that parking lot. And I didn't want to give up that number of spaces necessarily, or we're going to have to do some sort of structured solution into the hillside, which is which is an opportunity or an option that we could do, but you're still going to probably end up going up. Otherwise, you're going to be buried in the hill with those facilities. So here, at least, we could say, well, you could imagine and envision that all of the community homeowners, things that community and homeowners would do would all be on the ground level, and just let the offices go to the upper level and be in an office complex that would sort of wrap around. The exact design and detail of that could change. You could say, okay, well, we'll have less courtyard and we'll have more, all of that stuff is up for grabs in a more detailed design as you would get into it. Our real goal here, and what we're trying to say, is either we need to adjust our program and say, well, we don't need more arts and crafts room and we don't need more offices and all of these kinds of things. Or if we agree with our earlier suggestion that we need to about double the size of that, we either have to find more space on the ground for it, or we can go ahead with a two-story solution like we're showing here. It makes me, I just think that this makes more sense from visually on the site. It doesn't have to be huge, and it makes more sense from centralization on the site. If it doesn't work out, then options to the committee. As we look at it, what you want us to do, we'll take it back and we'll work on it. Let's go to the next slide. And we're going to go into the clubhouse here a little bit. So on this clubhouse plan, can we move this guy up there in that corner maybe, Booth? So we can, thank you. So obviously this is our arts and crafts building over here on the left-hand side. And then we're having our main entry and our new event entry coming in here. And I think changes to this plan since you've seen it last time at this site plan scale, we adjusted this area. There was some question whether this area, covered area and outdoor area, was big enough. And so we've shown a little bit more covered area, a similar amount of covered area, some more outside uncovered area, and some fire pits out on the lawn, which is a nice feature that you could do. Again, it's sort of graphic. It's not really, it's meant to tell us that we're doing something there. It'll ultimately get more design. The other thing I think we did is we're showing a little bit more connectivity and a little bit, I'll show you an interior diagram of this, which you can pick up on what we're doing a little bit better. And the last piece, two other pieces. One is we're showing an expanded service yard, which we didn't really show last time, but we think we should have more room in here to service that space. To service our kitchen and everything, so it's an expansion of the service yard. And the last piece was, as we were thinking about how this entry would work and how you might come to this front door and get dropped off, and you might want to just walk on a covered walkway down to that entry rather than have to either walk on sidewalks around or walk into the building and walk down the hallway. It gives you just a secondary option, and I think it could give us the opportunity as we start to change this building with new additions and the kind of work that we're talking about. We might want to, it gives us an opportunity to really change the facade or adjust the facade if we feel like it's necessary, because you could do these new arcade covered walkways that walk all the way around for the outdoor. You could walk in, for example, at this main porte cochere and turn right and come right into an outdoor dining area rather than coming into the house and coming back out of the house, and just sort of gets it all connected. There's opportunity for design there and design work that can create a much more unified appearance along the entire facade of the clubhouse. Give us something to work with as we start changing elements around the facade. I think that's all. It's a sort of in a master plan. It signals an intention of better connectivity on the outside as well as on the inside. Next slide. So there was some question that sort of came up about are we big enough, are our restrooms big enough, and those kinds of things. And what we're showing you here now is, largely what we're adjusting is not internal seating counts. We felt those were quite adequate in terms of 5,500 square feet for the bistro and bar area. Covered outdoor dining, it's 300 square feet more. It's de minimis in the 10% or so of what we're talking about there. Some increase in the member restrooms, especially on the a la carte side, I think about 80 square feet there of space more for the restrooms. And then the Sonoran room, which is sort of a private dining room, we talked about this last time, and there was some thought that maybe it could be a little bit bigger. So we are showing, in the last one we had that about 1,100 or 1,200 square feet. Now we're showing about 1,500. And then we get a new entry foyer, which is our entry into our ballroom space, and some more furniture storage back of the house space, which is really inadequate, and same thing with kitchen. The biggest adds here are the things that let us service the club better, service our members, our users, our guests better. So better furniture storage, better kitchen space, all of the back of the house stuff to let us really operate it, all serving similar number of seats and places within the facility. Next slide. So on this slide, we show a bit of a floor plan blow up. And again, it's a bubble diagram floor plan, and I'll explain it to you a little bit. So as you look at it, anything that's in brown here is an existing facility. So an existing wall or window or door, and it's all labeled what it is today. So the library or the Astilo room, the Saguaro room, or the, I don't know if that's cactus room or whatever room that is. That I can't read it. But then there's the ballroom up here. You can see the movable walls, which are those dashed lines through the space. So for example, all these sepia, tan, brown lines are all existing conditions. Any place we have the dashed lines is some sort of architecture that's removed. The fireplace is changed, for example. And it doesn't mean it has to be, but we're just showing exterior walls that are gone or that kind of thing. And then anything that's a bubble, a green bubble, basically is a member a la carte dining space or one of our homeowners areas like restrooms that sort of serve those spaces. The red bubbles are back of the house or storage spaces or kitchens or things like that. So you'll see red and red over here and red over here, and the red hallway space, which is our main service corridor to serve all that space. And then the purple space would be a new private dining space or a new event room space. So something that's more of a private space versus an open space, something you would book that space where you just show up and use that space, for example. And those are anything that's bubble is an area of expansion or change, or sometimes it's a reduction. In this plan, there's really no reductions. Everything's either the same or changed in location or expanded like the kitchen is. And what we're showing here is obviously expanding the kitchen out into where the dining room is. So this is the existing bar here, so we're blowing out past the dining room to get more space so that we can go from about 2,300 to 5,100 as we showed in the chart earlier. We're changing the storage space in the middle, so now we'll have much more adequate furniture storage to serve both the ballroom and things that might change in these meeting rooms or the Sonoran room across the way, and have access to that storage both from the service hallway and from the main front area of the club. As we get this event entry, remember one thing that we talked about in our earlier meeting was this whole idea of when we come to the club, we want to have more, when we come to use these facilities, we want to have more connection to the view. And so many of the decisions and the things that we've done here have all been about thinking about, well, how do we engage the view of the mountains more? And here we're showing, obviously, with this covered walkway, a much more engaged view at the exterior of the building with the view as you're walking along and seeing the view. As you come into this event foyer, coming to an internal event, we're in that ballroom, we're largely looking at a speaker or looking at a wedding or looking at some sort of internal event that we're dealing with. So view's not so important in there. But as we arrive to that event and leave from the event, you could have both pre-function and post-function spaces set up for things in the Sonoran room and the event foyer in this whole hallway especially this Sonoran room and the event foyer can all take advantage of that view and really open that up. So as you're coming out of this room and you coming to the event and coming into this space and you're meeting and greeting people and the view is the backdrop to all of that before you go into the room. If you come out of it afterwards and there's some sort of cocktail party or something like that, that'll all happen in this space and again, all touching that view. Largely, again, trying to get some more storage. These are existing porches that exist outside of this room today, which are largely underutilized. We could grab those spaces and fill them in for some more furniture storage off of those spaces. As we add on to, this is the existing outdoor covered walkway here, as we add on to it to get this Sonoran room, we pick up some storage and a service area for that Sonoran room. And then this service corridor would be expanded. This is the end of it today. So you can, on that service corridor, you can only get into this first ballroom space. Here, if you pull that wall, then anybody who wants to service this wall has to go outside and come back inside again if they're coming from that kitchen, or outside and come back inside again. So here, we'd expand that service corridor all the way down so that from the kitchen, you can get to each of these spaces directly without having to go outside. And so these are all just sort of theoretical, sort of planning ideas that give you the option that sort of shows you how this clubhouse is largely fit for purpose in terms of, restrooms, meeting rooms, all that kind of stuff, and with some relatively minor enclosures, additions to the building, and changes, we can have a building that would much better serve the community for years and years into the future, providing the things that we said we were looking for in our early meetings. I think, what do you think, Dan? Should we stop there and just do the sort of talk through the mountain view with people, or do you want me to go through the whole thing? Questions? I think you could relocate all of, there's sort of if anybody doesn't know, there's some outdoor refrigerators that are walk-in refrigerators out in the existing, that's sort of that dash line there, somewhere right in that area is where those are. And basically the idea would be to just have that largely for deliveries, maintenance items, and trash, and then all of the food items and after it's delivered and received will all be stored inside. That would be a point of making it bigger inside. One of the points. There's other points as well. There's, as you see, if you're in that dining room today, there's a lot of service stations that are sort of in the space of the dining room. They take a whole table and are rolling up silverware on it, and they take another table and they have their, just stuff sitting around all over the place. So by creating some more space, you can relocate some of those service stations back into the space. There is no employee dining room. I think you guys probably noticed that. So there's no place to change clothes or all this stuff that you would typically expect for a place where you would expect somebody to work an 8 or a 10-hour shift here at the club, but it's a split shift and they're going to be here 10 or 12 hours and they're going to work lunch and then they're going to work dinner or something like that. They've got a couple hours in the day that they're not doing anything. It's break time, legitimate break time. They ought to have a place they could go, that kind of thing. So that's just this is the kind of thing that happens. And so, yes, that kitchen is now going to be adequate to do all of that stuff and have a full service a la carte and banquet line that's big enough to handle the kinds of capacities that we're showing in this plan.
Is the event foyer, is that the hallway?
That's the existing hallway.
Is there any way to pull that event foyer forward?
You could, yeah. So the end of the existing hallway, see that door right there? That dashed line right there is the end of the existing hallway. So from here to there is the existing hallway. And then this, you go out that doorway and you go on the covered walkway from here to there. So that's all just covered walkway today. You could push the event foyer to here and then have that hallway connect behind it.
Was it your intent, and I apologize.
No worries.
Was it your intent to connect the event foyer with the ballroom?
Yes.
Okay.
I think when you think of it as a pre-function space, I think it sort of depends on how it's working on a day-to-day basis, but for a big ballroom event, I would assume that all of these ballroom doors would be open, and as you would come in here, you would take all of this space, the hallway space, the Sonoran room, and the event foyer, possibly some of this hallway, all as pre-function, working for meet and greet space going into the ballroom for that kind of big event.
Kevin, this might be a very not important point to anybody else, but it sure is important to me. There's no backstage for the theater. There's no place for the people that we bring in, TAD management and all that, to get onto the stage and not be seen. Because by moving storage there and taking away the Sonoran room, There is no entrance onto the stage except through that little storage area, which is also right now our houseman's office. Part of it at night, yes, we use it as a green room. There's no green room for any of the performers. Now, we have in the past, when we did shows in the round, and we didn't use the stage, we did use the Saguaro room, or I'm sorry, no, not the Sonoran, but the Saguaro room next to the Ocotillo room as the green room, and then we went across through the hallway to enter into the ballroom because the stage was in the middle of the ballroom on the same level. But not only is that a problem for community circle players, but it's also a problem for the people when we bring them in to do outside shows. Just a thought.
Bearing down into that level of detail. I mean, we have in our minds sort of what we think it might be, but I think it's frankly maybe a little early in the process to start splitting that room up. So yes, I think within that space, we'd have our bistro, our bar lounge, we'd have casual opportunities, we'd have indoor-outdoor spaces, which are sort of denoted by the arrows all the way along that site. And at this point, we have shown the existing bar and the existing fireplace and many of the, virtually all of the existing walls is being removed. You would have an opportunity as you would get into that design later to get into more detail about how you want all of that to operate, even to the extent that Dan and I were talking earlier, that F&B office might end up being relocated somewhere so that you would be able to pick up a sort of a Starbucks area in there. So I think that at this point, we're sort of signaling our intention that we need about 200 seats, and it's going to be our bar and our bistro, our casual opportunity, and then how we actually detail that in the future would come with future. We set that out there and leave it for future committees when it's time to actually do that project to figure out how that's going to be. I don't think it's our job at this committee level to be solving where the bar goes and where the doors go and where the fireplace goes. So that's sort of what we're trying to do with that. In terms of, and very similar to, you drive down into good detail in terming about the whole issue of where the green room is going to be. So obviously, originally where the housemen sit was meant to be a bit of the green room for that stage. It says storage there, right in this part right here. That's where the houseman sits today. Well, if we have all this storage up here, he doesn't have to sit there anymore necessarily. So maybe that could get converted back to the green room, or a piece of this area in here could get converted to the green room. Again, I think we've allocated so much space that you just don't have today that you could easily, that's all easily negotiated when you get into a detailed project. So, okay, now we're rolling up our sleeves. Now we're going to design this room and this room and this room, and it's all part of a project that we're going to present. At that point, you'd get into that and say, okay, at that point, you'd get staff, you'd get people who are using it, you'd get user groups who are interested in that area, and make sure you've got all of those things taken care of. And so I think largely our goal here, our opportunity here, is to think about, are we accomplishing the capacities and the necessary improvements within a design like this, or do we need to look at a more radical design that maybe, for example, you could imagine somebody would say, well, we need a more radical design because this is not getting what we need to do. Now, I don't think that's the case, but you could see how somebody could say, well, this is not big enough, or this is not well enough located. We should just knock that down and start over again with that area. So, but I think largely we're able to show with this diagram we can get within a space like this enough capacity. We can get it so that we don't have the room being so deep. Today, the room goes all the way back to here, away from the view. So from there to there is the distance to the view. And now we're able to eliminate all of that space and put it all in back of the house space to get us, 40 feet closer to the view, so that we're able to have more tables all along the views, both ways there. So that was, working to the view, getting the right size, getting the right shapes of the rooms is more the goal of this diagram. Well, anything can be done in phases, and then that gets into the whole discussion of, well, what's a phase and what's an effective and appropriate phase, right? So you could look at this and say, well, this whole right-hand side of the plan could all be a phase that you could do, and you wouldn't do anything on the left-hand side of the phase. But at some point, you would get to the point where you'd say, well, I just want to do the kitchen. Well, you probably aren't going to be able to just do the kitchen as a phase because it affects too many other things in a domino way. So, and then you want the phase to be big enough that you're not spending a lot of extra money in mobilization costs, because if you do like 10 different phases and they're all little phases, you're going to spend twice as much money doing that kind of 10 phases if you would have just put them all together because of all the mobilization costs, starting and stopping and all of that kind of stuff, and thinking about how phases go together. So yes, everything we're showing you could be in phases. It's another group's responsibility eventually to figure out what those phases are going to be. Let's go forward. Next slide, please. So this is our desert view aerial photo site plan, and again, maybe not the most current one, but pretty close. You can see the existing tennis courts. Now, one of the issues, as you will remember, with these tennis courts is they're wrongly oriented and they're least favorable tennis courts on the entire campus or community. So that's one of the, and we were trying in the previous design to lift those and turn them so that they could be properly orientated. Now we've removed them all together, and you'll see what that does for us. Other than that, I think you're still going to have a pool here, just like you're going to have a pool at each of your facilities, it seems. And so that's something that we've left in place on each of the facilities. And you're still going to have we're in this theater room today. The library's at the front here, fitness rooms wrap around the rest of the facility. We have this open space here that's just unutilized space today that's sort of between the theater and the fitness and the pool. And you'll see, I think many of you will remember that there's an opportunity there that we'll look at. And then you'll notice in this area there's a lot of opportunity here that we're going to show you that in this next plan as we bring it up. So next slide, please. In this plan, basically same chart that we looked at before, but this is for this room. And so basically the additions to this building are the 3,000 square feet for the community gathering space that would have some sort of catering kitchen within it, that kind of thing. And then we're calling for a multi-use activity center, which is also our indoor pickleball facility. And both of those are additive at this spot. So go to the next slide. And then you can sort of see how that can work itself out visually on the site. So here's our existing clubhouse in the sepia here, which is our theater, our fitness, and our library. And then basically up at where the existing tennis courts are is 119 new parking spaces. And we have our existing main entry that comes in today from the parking lot, our library entry, our west entry down here. And then what we're showing now is just as we had last time, a new gathering space for after theater events, or people who are gathering are getting a cafe after a workout or something like that. We've made that even more centralized in this plan, as now what we've done is there was a lot of talk about, well, we need a place for our outdoor lawn games or activities that we're doing in the dirt over here today. And so we're calling for an outdoor activity lawn area. And then that lawn area would be around the outside edge with a new covered walkway / covered viewing area so that you could be undercover and enjoying those activities. You could get undercover when you're not actually playing, and you could come back out and play on the lawn when you are playing. So it gives you some protection from the sun, always important. And then here we have that sort of now centralizes up for the theater, for this outdoor lawn activity, and for our multi-use activity, for our pool and our fitness. So, well, sort of the spoke of the hub of the wheel there is right in the middle where all of those gathering spaces come together. Obviously, off of this new parking area at the top, we'd pick up an entry there to get into that multi-use activity center. Obviously, that's a 6 or 8 court indoor pickleball facility. At the same time, when you're not playing pickleball in there, you could have all of those activities that you guys have studied in the past for within that kind of facility. It gives you great flexibility within it to have all of the other kinds of camps, dance classes, band practice, anything like that could be going on. As the units have their particular potlucks or whatever, that gives a place where all of that kind of stuff could happen, and it's directly connected to that lawn area. So with that covered viewing area, so you could imagine that there could be doors that would open up, and this all becomes this one large gathering space that the community doesn't really quite have today. The sort of really casual, informal gathering space where large groups of people can sort of come together and do a thing. That doesn't, I don't think, really exist at the community today. So it gives you that opportunity. And again, this, in a master plan, this could be a 20-year project, but what it says to us is if we think we're ever going to do something like this, we would want to reserve that space and not put something else there that's going to cost us a lot of money so that then it precludes us from being able to have this space in the future. I think the same thing would happen with the tennis courts that are here. It may be years and years that we'll still have those tennis courts here, but at some point in the future, you might come back and say, now is the time that we're going to have to do something with the tennis courts at Mountain View. It's, their useful life is up, and now is the time to look at moving a couple of courts from here over to Mountain View and sort of make that transition slowly. Or the other thing that you could imagine happening is this area is getting so much activity on such a regular basis that you really need that parking space. And so that gives you the key to say, okay, now is the time. We can get some more parking. We can start to implement that tennis court plan on that kind of thing. But it gives you that outline to let you sort of know what you're doing in the future. Doesn't mean you have to do it anytime, but if you ever get to the point that you need to, it gives you the ability to say, okay, that's where that's going, and that lets us do those things. I think really that's what we have for the Desert View facility. Go ahead. No, I didn't. I missed that. It's my thing. So. We'll make a note to try to get that on there to add storage. But there's actually room to do it. I'm just looking at the plan, but I missed it. I'm sorry. Any other?
So at the beginning, you talked about how nuclear programs cost more money.
Right.
Which is what we are, essentially.
Right.
We have duplicative services at different places. So then why would we do this? Why would we add a multi-use center with more pickleball courts in a place that is not located to the pickleball courts? Why would we add a new outdoor sports cafe when we already have kitchen facilities someplace else? Because these suggestions look like they are going to drive operating costs even higher again by adding these. And if the board decides that they want to look at limiting cost, shouldn't we be looking at that in this planning, that it would be better to consolidate some of these things rather than just using the space simply because we have it?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. I think it's a good point. I think there's thoughts about that both ways. I think you just sort of have to decide. One thing that you have to look at is if you think you're going to ever have a facility like that, there's only a limited number of places around the site that seem like there would be adequate for it. One thing that you can't build that thing and not have parking for it, so you have to have, those things sort of tie up together. If you're going to have that kind of activity center, you have to have a lot of parking that sort of supports that, because that could get a lot of use day by day with people just coming and going and using it all the time. So you wouldn't want to necessarily put it either at an out-of-the-way place, like up at the Preserve, which can be out of the way to probably 2/3 of our community, or more central. I thought more centralized was better in that regard. And then in terms of this sort of theater gathering space or post-activity gathering space is a need that you have today in this facility, in my opinion. Maybe, I think we'd heard that in the committee before. You don't want to, if you come here to an event, basically all you have is that hallway and that one little bar that's at the end of the hallway to serve 200 people or whatever it is that are sitting in this room. It seems completely inadequate to me, both for before theater performances and after theater performances. So the genesis of that was to try to kill 2 or 3 birds with one stone. We lack at this, we're going to have at this facility fitness, we're going to have at this facility theater, and we're going to have at this facility pool. And those 3 things each could use some sort of support for gathering. And so our answer to that was to provide that support here. If you're going to have an operation, you need to support it with the proper socializing and gathering spaces to make that operation a functional part of your community. And if you don't provide that, then you just lose that opportunity for the synergy, the serendipity of meeting friends and neighbors, and the kinds of things that build community within the community, is to have the gazebo structure that everybody comes to after the event in the park or whatever. You have to have centers of activity that people can gather informally together, rather than just coming to an event and then leaving from the event. If you don't think you want that, or you don't want these kinds of things, you could easily just mark it off the plan and say, well, we don't need that here. That's another option, and it's up to this committee to decide that. It's not my plan, it's your plan. You have to decide what you think and what you want about these things.
If you go back to the existing surface area,
Sorry.
back one slide, I think.
Go back one slide.
Oh,
One
no,
more?
2, one more, yeah. So, our new cornhole is going to be in that space where you put lawn games, and then we have this empty space right now. Just looking at the footprint as it exists, talking to a lot of people, when you talked about having a gathering place for the theater, that empty space could be a gathering space for all of this. It can be attached to the patio for the pool, but it can be a juice bar, a coffee bar. It can be a theater, where the tree is, the empty space that's right there.
This space here.
Yes, that area. In talking to people, if they're out walking, they're playing tennis, they're at cornhole, they're at the pool, they're at the gym, a gathering place in the spot that is right there without having to do a mega thing is something that people have talked about that they would like. And whether you talk about, again, it's a coffee, it's a juice bar, later on, and maybe it even has some game entertainment or something with it. But why aren't we just thinking about using that space instead of just taking things apart in mega style that we can't afford?
Well, I wasn't so concerned about affordability yet, because affordability is all down to phases and what you want to do and when you want to do it. But it is, I think it's easy to think about. For example, there's nothing really in this space today either. I know there's some courts there or whatever, but this is just, it's open space just as that's open space. What we were thinking about is, as we were looking at that open space, it tied directly up to literally that door right there. So you could walk out that door and be right into that cafe space, and it ties directly up to the fitness, and it ties directly up to that pool area, and it could tie directly up to a multi-purpose activity center. But easily, you could you could flip all this stuff around and do it in a different order. So if you said, okay, well, I'd rather have this sort of green cafe to be further up here, that could happen. You just have to look at all of the other dominoes that creates. Go back to the plan slide, and that's like 2 slides further. That one. So that green box there isn't demolishing anything really to speak of. I mean, there's some ramps there or something to get that in there. But if you wanted that green box to be here, you would change the shape of this multi-purpose activity center. If you wanted that sort of 19,000 square feet, it would become longer and narrower, and maybe the lawn would go here. All of those things are possible. It's all part of the design process to sort of decide. The first thing, going back to the first question, is do we need these things? And assuming we do need these things, then you'd have to look at, well, what's the most logical place for them to go? I'll just say it again, I like this area because it tied up to all of these things, but I'm not 100% right all the time. You know, you could easily tell me, Glenn, you're wrong. This would be a much more appropriate place for this green box to go up here, and we could draw that and sort of show how that could work. That's easy to do.
Glenn, if I could dovetail on Denise, I think what she's saying is, I don't want to put words, but this is a way out there idea for the community and where it's at.
Right.
Not saying it's not a bad idea. Why can't we have option A, Desert View, and option B, where you have the lawn area? Why can't you put we're just starting up this whole initiative around Cornhole, leave the Cornhole complex there, and then go in a totally different direction. Kevin, I'm thinking about our first time you and I ever met, and we were at Mountain View, and take that space right there and make it more of a park-like gathering space, and just put a different creative idea. We got the multi-use activity. We got this outdoor. We got this picture in our head.
Right.
So now give us B, and B is a lot cheaper than this option and allows us to utilize the space that we have to piggyback on what we do have as we move forward, and maybe someday this can become a reality. Does that make sense?
Makes sense. I'm okay with that.
It's using the existing as opposed to dreaming way out there, okay? And you know, this is for our internal discussion afterwards, but we have a lot of adverse big project expense people who would not go for this. In the meantime, we do not want a piece of empty property that could have a refreshment center, social gathering place to remain.
I'm understanding what you're asking for, and I think that makes sense. I mean, so sometimes these things happen in multiple stages over time, right? As you're looking at it, you think, well, maybe this isn't even the right goal, but you could say, okay, well, there's ways that we can make this better now, or in the short term, and still have a goal for the long term that's a bigger, more expansive design. And so I'm understanding what you're saying, and we can definitely look at interim steps along the way. Some things don't lend themselves to it, but this is pretty easy, to think about interim steps. Yeah. Let's go to the next slide. Keep moving. So this is our preserve facility, and this is a more updated aerial photo than we had last time, everybody. So you can see the pickleball courts that were in that are now back to a tennis court, and those old pickleball courts are gone. So, and then basically, this is our entry drive, our parking lot, obviously, golf cart parking, 3 tennis courts, cart storage area, open cart storage area, our main entry into the preserve facility, our view edge of the preserve all the way along this line here. Our kitchen is this little box here, more or less, and then this is the fitness area at the preserve today. And again, this is still going along this idea that we're going to have multiple operations at every place. And so you'll see in the next pictures that we're still thinking of having fitness here, and still thinking of having pool here, and still thinking of having tennis here, because this is serving whatever third of our population that's way away from our other third, completely across from Saddlebrook 1 from everybody else. So it sort of lends itself to continuing to do that. Let's look at the next slide, which is now a flattened image of this, and it's in the same language as we've been talking about. So the peach, again, we're not thinking of knocking the building down. The building's in good shape, and although there's obviously ongoing infrastructure and maintenance that has to be done on any building, you look at that building and think that there's nothing about that building that says we need to knock it down and start over again. It's just that it's not adequate in size in certain areas to do what we're wanting to accomplish in the space. And so as we look at that, we think, well, one thing, as we come in this drive, we've got that space where the old pickleball court's down there. There's an opportunity of about 15,000 square feet of space there, which is, it's small, but you could have a community maintenance facility or some other kind of maintenance facility could go in that space, be landscaped within a walls and be sort of hidden. You'd sort of see it as you're coming in, but once you're past it, you're past it. I think you could landscape it and put walls along this side, so as you're coming up 10 Fairway, it's not particularly visible, or down 10 Fairway, I guess. And then as you come to this facility, we're showing now, again, the green lines are all new additions onto the facility in terms of new patios or golf cart parking or those kinds of things, new walkways and ramps around this end of the building. Our peach are showing new enclosed footprint for the building, so making additions to the building here and in this central courtyard space that's really just a walk-through today. And then we're changing up some of the way the entries work. So the main entry stays in the same place, but we create a new athletic entry off of the circle, and we'd still have a pool entry off the circle, but we wouldn't have a secondary pool entry here because that's going to go through the kitchen. So the only pool entry would be through this way and into the pool building and then back into the pool here, instead of having multiple accesses to the pool. And then as we come around this facility here, we have a walk coming up to the top. We'll have a secondary entry here. So after golf, you might come up this way and come in an entry this way as well. So that sort of covers the additions and the things that we're thinking about on this. And remember, last time we sort of stayed at this site plan level, but now on this next slide, we're going to show you a chart that sort of shows you what we're increasing based on what we've talked about here in previous meetings. So we're getting a new indoor-outdoor bar. The grill room and the bar all sort of together in one space today. So that's at 3,000, and it's getting down to about 2,300. The indoor-outdoor bar becomes a new space within this plan. The poolside cafe doesn't exist at all, and we're going to take and create a new poolside cafe at this operation. Again, providing those central gathering spaces around activities at our various facilities. And then our fitness is about 900 or 1,000 square feet today, and we're going to about 3,500 space. And then the golf shop and storage is a little bit undersized today, and we're showing a little bit more room, mainly for back of house within that golf shop, we would suppose. I don't think the sales floor needs to be a lot bigger. And then the meeting rooms are largely about 200 square feet more. In the kitchen, just as at our other facilities, the kitchen is significantly undersized. We're more than doubling the size of the kitchen to serve all of this activity that we're thinking we could create over here. And go to the next slide. On this slide now, you sort of see a graphic image of how that all comes together on the plan. And so this is our main entry today. As you come into the main entry today, the foyer sort of works today the way it is. It's kind of nice with the fireplace and the meet-greet aspect of it that you have there today. But I think in our last plan that we showed you, we sort of talked about potentially doing the bar up here. Once you told me I could relocate the golf shop, it made a lot more sense visually and traffic flow-wise to push the indoor-outdoor bar into the old golf shop in this sort of breakout room off of the grill room. So now we pick up that indoor-outdoor bar here. You have the ability to have folding glass walls that sort of open up onto this outdoor space. And then you have this really bar gathering space that takes advantage of the views, as well as now removing the bar from the back of this room and redirecting all of the seating in the room instead of focusing on the bar on this upper platform. We'd rotate that and get it going the opposite direction so that it's more looking at the views as well. And so the grill room largely stays the same, but removing the bar from it, the new indoor-outdoor bar, and it sort of lets you make a decision as you would come to the foyer. In the foyer, you could walk straight ahead and go to the bar, and if you say, well, I'm not really a bar person today, I just want to sit down at a table, you could just bypass the bar altogether and go to a table that way. So it gives you a real clear visual cues on where to go and how to go, and then you still have this extra opportunity of coming out on this side, which is probably going to more serve this pavilion patio space at the top. Now, as you come in this athletic entry down at the bottom of the page off of the turn circle, you have the ability to come straight in and go to a cardio, strength, and stretching room, which again, not detailed yet, but we know we're going to need something on the order of 3,500 square feet to do that adequately at this site. And then you'd have all of this being view corridor. So as you're working on various machines or other things, you're always catching the views of the mountains all the way along that side. Rather than today, that is over here with views of the pool. Not bad views, but just too much too small. And then here in this area, we're able to pick up our new golf shop. And the golf shop would have its own entries, obviously, but you come in that athletic entry, go to the changing rooms, and come back through the golf shop. The same thing, go in that athletic entry and come straight into the golf shop, go in the athletic entry and hit changing rooms. As a part of this, we'd probably provide some family changing rooms that are unisex so that you have some place that serves all the various activities that are here at the club, at this club building. And then we, obviously, as you're in the golf shop, direct access out to the cart queuing. As you're coming back from game, you could come up the ramp and come right onto this outdoor golf patio. So it really sort of ties the golf back into the game of golf. The game of golf and the bar all sort of tie together much more naturally, as well as the golf shop at the front entry corner to much better control and visual. That came out of our last meeting, so we were able to implement that and sort of show how that could work. The meeting rooms, which today do have a view but are largely internally focused, the view's not very even, it's really just a couple of doors, not the rooms don't really take advantage of it. So we'll make those more internally focused rooms here. And the kitchen expansion is showing in new construction under, some of this is largely existing roofed area, but we get some new roofed area as well to get the kitchen up to that size that we were talking about. Plus we have that service corridor that comes in the back of it. That all serves into this poolside cafe, which has, naturally you'd be able to come in off of the main entry into the poolside cafe or out of the poolside. It just gives you that cafe at the preserve effect that lets you have a sort of a casual gathering place and easy to service out of an existing kitchen, which is right there. That would get you a space right into that space, get you service right into that space for coffees or meeting and greeting, or it gives you a place that you could open up your laptop like I did today in Mountain View. Dan and I were working at Mountain View earlier looking at these slides. It just gives you a place here at the preserve that could happen as well. I think it's good to have. It gives you that ability to have a unisex changing facility, and it gives you the ability to, as you increase the size of all of these facilities, in terms of gives you the ability to have this little activity there. It's good from all number of points of view. Sometimes people at different stages in their lives need help with toileting, and so if I'm coming with my granddaughter or daughter, or you're coming with one of your family member who needs some help, it gives you a place to do that without having to be sort of excluded from the facility,
Could you pass the mic over? The folks in the audience want to hear you.
So I was just questioning the need for the family changing rooms since the restrooms, locker rooms are just right adjacent to the bar. If we didn't need them, then we could make the gym larger.
You could. They're about 120 square feet each, so you'd pick up about 360 or 400 more square feet by eliminating them in that area. I think I think in a scale of this facility, what you're talking about here, I would like to, we're putting them in all of our facilities. They don't have to go there though. We could put them anywhere. We could put them in a new addition on the building out here somewhere or whatever. It was just space left over. In other words, we set that along an existing, we set this along an existing wall, and then we felt like, well, that space today is space that's part of the back of the house of the existing golf shop, and so we just sort of used the space that we had, but you could blow it all up and do whatever you want. That could be more. If we think we need that to be 4,000 instead of 3,500, we could grab some more space and do that. I would still, no matter what, I would still suggest you'd want at least one of these. We had room to put two, so.
So when we get into the refinement phase, we can pull things out, add things in. I want to talk a minute about kitchen sizes.
Yes.
When I'm looking at the difference between the Mountain View kitchen and the Preserve kitchen, my assumption is that's all predicated on how many people you think you're feeding. Is that accurate?
It's largely predicated on, at this point in time, it's largely predicated on me having designed lots of kitchens for lots of facilities like this and sort of having a good rule of thumb knowledge of how big kitchens ought to be to serve particular kinds of spaces, Matt. So, having been doing this since 1993, I've done lots of kitchens, and you know as a matter of course that if you're doing something on the order of 2,300 square feet, you're going to want to have about 2,300 square feet of kitchen to serve that, and then that at sometimes we're going to have we're going to have some parties out there, so you're going to have a little extra space to deal with the parties or that kind of thing. So, and then if you compare that to the Mountain View, it's a similar kind of thing. So there could be a lot of extra demands on the Mountain View kitchen relative to having simultaneous service into banquets versus, I don't see this as having as much simultaneous service, and so I've designed this kitchen tighter. Could happen, but I was thinking of this as more, either we're going to be having this party outside on this patio, and they're not going to be separate a la carte service at the same time, or we're going to have people are eating a la carte and eating a la carte on the patios, whatever that would be. But it's not going to be like I'm going to have a big 200-person event, and at the same time I'm serving another 100 people a la carte inside of this facility. That seems, to me, unlikely, whereas I think that could happen more at Mountain View. I think it probably does today at Mountain View, where you'd have people eating in that thing, and at the same time something's going on in that ballroom or in one of those private dining rooms, and you're trying to serve an event out of that side. So the size of the kitchen at Mountain View is scaled to that simultaneous service, whereas this one is scaled more to single service most of the time. Yep.
We went 20 years under developer ownership without any improvements, okay? So now here we are in the 20 to 30th years, and yeah, this all looks great, okay? I guess my question is twofold. Where would you start, okay? Second of all, this is millions and millions of dollars, okay? So when you've worked with communities that have aged, okay, normally if these were our homes, we would have done an improvement every 5 years. We would never have gotten to this place. But when we transitioned, this is what we got, okay? And so now we have to deal with it. So where would you start, and how do other aging communities that you've worked with deal with the massive scope of something like this? We need your professional expertise on that.
Sure. So, Kevin, you want to jump in on this too? I don't want to leave you out of the entire meeting, but I'll start though. Where would I start? Well, that's really actually a bit of a scientific process. So you show, some of it is right here in this group. We need to prioritize amongst ourselves. We have priorities that are given to us in the survey that we've already taken amongst the entire ownership. So we need to look at that survey. We need to soul search here amongst ourselves. And then we, based on that, sort of start looking at, okay, this is a higher priority and this is a lower priority. Some of the other factors that go into that decision, in my mind, are extreme weaknesses, things that are extremely weak, like our maintenance facilities or our back-of-the-house facilities, which are very, very weak and underserve us and underserve our staff. And then I also think that you would look at facilities like you would tie up facilities. So you're always trying to find things that go together in such a way that either they support themselves in the phase, or you can say both. We have something that we think we can get a lot of support for some facility. I'm not sure what that would be. Maybe it'd be some sort of facility like the Mountain View Dining Facility. Updating that would be something we could get a lot of support for, having a much better dining facility and having a kitchen that serves that better. And then you try to tie that to some other need, so that you're packaging two or three things together, something that people really want with something that's sort of like the sugar around the medicine pill. You got to do this thing, so you got to give them something they want, and at the same time give them something that needs to happen at the same time. So there's always that sort of political aspect of trying to think about how to put it all together. How you do it is, it's just like how do you eat an elephant? You do it one bite at a time. So the communities like yours all over the country have to systematically approach making these improvements. You find you're not the only community that's turned over and found out that the developer has somehow, just through spending a lot of money, made it work. And now you don't want to spend that much money to make it work anymore. You want it to be more efficient. And you want it to serve you better. And you're the owners now, so now you have to think about, like the developer probably said, well, that golf course equipment's not too important to me because I'll just lease it and I'll just turn it back in. And he didn't have the same time horizon of you as owners have when you own that golf maintenance facility and own that equipment. Now you have to think about taking care of it more because you want it to last longer so that you don't have to pay so much for it. He didn't worry about that, frankly, because his time horizon was, I'm going to turn it over and I'm not going to worry about it anymore. Or his time horizon was, well, you know what, I've just got to make it last a few more years and I'll be done with that. So the way we do that is you start with a plan like we've been showing you here, and you start to prioritize that plan. What's most important to get done, and what's going to help us get votes to get something like that done. People will support doing a thing like that. And you take the highest priority items first, and usually when you're doing it, you try to get several things together to get a reasonably sized project, so you have a big enough phase that it makes worthwhile for us to spend all this time doing it. And then usually after 5 or 6 years later, you're ready to now think about the second phase of the project. And then 5 or 6 years later, you're ready to think about the third phase of the project. And you sort of have to think about it in 5 to 7 year tranches of how over the next 20 years we're going to accomplish a large majority of what we're showing. Some of these things we'll never do, and that's fine. At least we know if we ever have somebody die and give us $10 million, we know where that pickleball sitter is going to go because we've got it on the map. If that person never dies and never gives us $10 million, it's no big deal. At least we knew where it's going to go, that kind of thing. So I think, that's the way, that is the tried and true systematic approach to getting projects done in large ownership organizations where we have lots of individual owners of all of these assets. And we've seen it work time and time again. And a lot of times it can happen, it can sort of generate enthusiasm on itself, Sometimes it does, a lot of times it does. So that's, Kevin, you want to?
Yeah, I think that ties into how, as things depreciate out, as your facilities get older and you have to do something, as Glenn said, you know, when those tennis courts in Mountain View get to the point where they need to be replaced, well, that's the time to say, well, gee, maybe now's the time we redo everything and add 3 more courts and make this the tennis center kind of thing. And the same thing with any of your facilities, rather than reinvest money where things are now, say, well, rather than doing that, let's do it the right way. Rather than recarpeting and redecorating and doing what we do to these dining rooms, maybe now's the time to look at doing the entire food and beverage process. Because if we invest money now, it's going to be much less likely that you're going to invest money in the next 5 to 10 years, because everybody's going to say, oh, we just spent money on that. And you're not unique, and you know, developers are our best friend, because we come in to clubs and HOAs all around the country 20 and 30 years after a developer has built something, because typically it's undersized. And it's not unusual, because you have to understand, when a developer builds something, there's 0 houses here when they start. And so they build things for a modest amount of use. And now, as you've built out, and you're even still building to some regard, you've outgrown some facilities. And while you've made it work, as Glenn said, it hasn't worked efficiently, it hasn't worked as well as it should have. Food and beverage is a great example. We always go into developer clubs, and the kitchens are always undersized. We go into developer clubs, the golf course maintenance facilities are undersized. All those kinds of areas are undersized. But that's just what they do, and we have to deal with the consequences.
Yeah, that's good advice. And it's also, I think what you said about, you know, this isn't a 10-year plan. This is a 20-year plan, okay? But also, in the near run, you have to think about what's a win for everyone. We can't have wins that are single. We can't be having the residents focus on a single point which they can say hell no to. We have to find the sweet spot where we can do a little of this for this and this. There has to be big wins for big money, okay? And, you know, I know, well, we'll talk about it more in our individual piece, but, you know, I think there are some sweet spots here. One, which is painful, a maintenance building, but, you know, we know what we have there is totally inadequate and unsafe. And, you know, there's no win for that to the residents. It's a pain. It's painful. But, you know, if we can engage them around a new dining or social area facility, that might be a win, okay? That's going to be our internal work, and that's not going to be easy, because we are aversive to single-focused projects that are expensive. This has to have multiple focus. And I know our timeline was not to be beyond 2029. I think that's a discussion we're going to have internally, because we have to bring the community with us, and they may not be on that timeline. So, you know, those are things. But we have to wrap this as universal benefit.
Yeah, no question. And it's not about not only what our current residents want, but what the future residents want as well. We have to consider what does the person want who's going to buy my house? You know, whenever that's going to be, 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road. What do they want to see in the community? And for us to know that, we can certainly look at other communities that are being developed, look at what Robeson's doing other places and what those facilities look like. And if we want to make sure that we're attractive, and you're exactly right, a lot of it has to do with socialization. When people move into a community, the amenities are one thing, but the programs and socialization are what it's all about, the friendships people are going to make.
At Saddlebrook Ranch, because if you look at their dining room, guys, how is that going to be when they have 10,000 homes? Way too small, okay? Look at their gym, same thing. So, you know, we're inheriting what is a prototype, and now we have to make it ours. But we have to get people excited, and they have to all see something in what we're doing, or we're going nowhere.
Yes.
One thing we did mention at one point is, could you look at covering that lap pool at Mountain View? You know, I mean, that could be part of, okay, we need to do the maintenance yard, but hey, in the same thing, we're going to, for not too many bucks probably, cover the lap pool so it can be used more hours, 12 months out of the year, summer, winter, whatever. Those kind of things maybe we can throw in. Maybe the gathering, the green grass, put some badminton nets in up at Desert View with your cornhole and your, green grass and stuff like that. Walking paths, throw that, all those things, as that's answered a lot of people's interests for not a ton of money, but we have to address the maintenance yards.
Those are all good ideas. I think that's the kind of thing that's the way we are often building a program like this, to have something to show to the community at large of how we would start on a project like this and get some high priority things and some things that we know we need to do, just because we're the leaders and we're now the ones who are responsible for making sure that we can still have golf courses or we can still have community maintenance over time.
Well, we have to move our community from fight mode to being engaged with us. And, they're still out there, they're on the fringe. This has got to be something that excites them. So where we would ever start has to encompass wide interests and excitement.
Let's see, where are we? Can you go back to the slide? What's the next slide? Go one more. So we're now at goals and next steps. So for the maintenance, we have those after, so we can look at those later. But let's do this part next, don't you think, Dan? See where we are?
Here we go. They're all great. Let's do the next slide or two. So this is just a reminder of what we're targeting to do today, refine concepts, start to bring closure of our ideas. We're getting closer at this point. Discussing priorities. Gee, what did we just talk? And I think we're going to I want to spend a little more time after we release these guys and just take us through an exercise of what we're each think we're bringing in here, that we're hearing from the community and the work we've done thus far. And we'll go through this exercise and see if it brings any highlights or aha moments that says, oh, we need some more help from these guys, or no, we're feeling like we're getting toward a master plan here. And then September's meeting, we've asked Kevin and Glenn, it's time to start putting some
Order
swag.
of magnitude.
Yeah, order of magnitude, okay. Some guesses as to, is this $1 million or is this a 10 million? And they have some ways to talk about that, and then of course targeting to bring this to the board in October. So next slide. So obviously we'll get notes out from the meeting today. We'll get a couple of updates. I think you got a couple of things down at Desert View that you were going to throw some other options at. Not sure what else Kevin's got, but he's been busy typing.
He's going to remind me of what everybody said.
Yeah.
And if I don't get it on the drawing, it's all Kevin's fault.
Okay. And then again, we'll do this, we'll get some cost discussions at the next meeting in September. And we'll do this prioritization tool or this exercise. We'll do it again next time. And next time we'll have the ability to include some of the cost discussion as we look at this exercise. So, you you want to move on to the next, I think there's 2 more slides to get into.
Yeah, so that's, thank you, and then, I mean,
And then-
we didn't, I mean, go to the next slide, guys. So, I think what we were thinking of here was just to sort of, again, an overview of our existing community maintenance and golf maintenance facilities. This is the one at Mountain View, and when we started this process, we sort of thought, well, we already have a bit of a solution for this area, but what we've heard and what we found is that that solution is maybe a short-term solution or something like that, whereas some of the master plan ideas were looking for bigger solutions. And one of our challenges is we don't really have, being from St. Louis and all that kind of stuff, we don't really know where the opportunity sites are other than the ones that you tell us about, right? So it's like you guys have to give us a little bit of help on what kind of places we have opportunities for developing. So as we showed you, you can sort of start to gather the scope of what one of these sites looks like on our existing hillside site. If there are other sites that are available, if there's a way to buy some property here or a way to look at other places around the community, we just don't know what they are or haven't identified them yet. So the notion of this site is, and there was some talk about this at the last presentation, is there's a certain number of houses that are relatively close to this site. And so opportunities would be to potentially buy those houses and not have them close to this site. Another opportunity that we have that's already drawn up is the option of expanding this site down, which would basically be in front of one additional house, which is that white driveway on the, let me see if my pointer will work. This white driveway right here. So if we expand this down and get some parking, which you can see we're sorely in need of, there's all kinds of improvements that could happen within this space. And if we had some more parking, that would be an improvement to this site. Obviously, you're always going to have this person here. And if there was some place that we could get a few more acres, I don't know where, then you would have the ability to come in and say, okay, well, that kind of site would be what you would want in a master plan facility, whether that would be largely, most of the time in a community like yours, it means buying something, right? Buying either property or houses or something to get more space to be able to do things. So in this case, we're looking at, this is a space that we have access to, it's our property, and we could grab that space. And you can see, the main thing I wanted to show you on this is there's some concern, how many houses are we next to? Well, this one we're right on top of, obviously, and these right here we're near to, and if we put some more parking here, would be near to that one. But it's really 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 houses, so it's not, I mean, in the scope of our community, it's relatively small, and frankly, that maintenance facility was there before those houses were, for the most part. So, it's sort of where we are in life, but that's sort of what we have. So go to the next slide, and this is...
I do know something about the land to the right.
Yeah?
We don't own it. It's owned by the First American Title Corp. According to the, can you hear me? Okay. According to the county, that land to the right, that if you go back to the, where the yellow is, we don't own that. That's owned by First American Title Corp.
Okay.
And then everything around it is state land.
This is all state land outside of this line here. Yeah. So that would even that improvement apparently might involve purchase.
Well,
Yeah, it would require purchase, I think.
it's a political issue. This idea has been provided to me by someone near and dear to me, is that why don't we use our political leverage here and see if we can't get a couple acres pushing to the south here to offset what we're doing from these homeowners. And obviously that would be a long, arduous task.
Long-term
That
project.
is state land, and that would involve the state's willingness to be able to do that for us.
So, and that's much like this is when you're in a confined community and with surrounded by state land and other people's property, this is not an easy solution where you just have one solution on the master plan and sort of, oh, that fixes it all. There's probably, that solution doesn't seem to exactly exist here. And so that's sort of where we are. There are some solutions that, that are sort of could be effective solutions. Some of these might be relatively short-term solutions with some additions and some other things that could make, a community. There's about a 4,000 square foot space there where you could get a CAM building, for example, and you'd replace all of these little bunkers that you have and portable buildings that you have here today with one new building. So that's an option that exists, and it provides some improvement, but it doesn't really fix that these areas are undersized. You're always going to have that, and they're not poorly located. They're just not centrally located. So these are not poorly located, but you don't have one central facility that sort of does it all for you, and that's just right. Kevin was saying safety issues.
Yeah. Well, so if you were to improve the existing site, how much would you expend? And, if you were to just start over on the new site, safety, political, and all of that
right.
saved, again, you're investing in a site that probably isn't desirable, and it's arduous to do anything around it because somebody else owns part, state owns part. So if you were to go to the hillside, what would that cost?
Yeah, we'll have some information on that we'll think about it anyway for our next meeting when we talk about priorities. I mean, obviously, fixing up this site in a moderate way like this is going to be a lot less than redeveloping a whole new site, no matter where you put it. But a hillside site is going to be incredibly expensive to deal with because of all the land work and all that kind of stuff. But it doesn't mean it's not the right thing. You can put it on the map and address it over a period of time. And eventually you'd have something that everybody would be really proud of, and it really it sort of serves you well, serves the community well for the long term. This is unlike some of the other decisions that we're talking about here, these decisions, getting these right, they're 50-year decisions. You're not going to, if you fix a maintenance building, you're not going to come back and do much else to it for another 50 years. I know this because in my career, I've done some of them, and I've seen the kind of time frame that these buildings, once they're there, they're there for the long term, so you want to do it right if you can at all. This is not a 10-year, I mean, these could be like 10-year fixes or whatever, or short-term fixes that'll get you over the hump. They're still going to cost a lot of money, but it would be better than what you have, in that regard. So it's something that I don't want to belabor it. We don't have there's a lot of unknowns in this whole thing. So, but let's go to the next slide. And you can see one thing on that slide. It's 1 acre today, and that would get you to 1 1/4 acre, which is, especially when you include a CAM operation and all the other things that's going on in there, that is you really can't get much smaller than that. Let's go to the next slide. This slide is the one up at Mountain View. It's a little bit more separated, a little bit more protected. As you can see, there's a little bit more buffer zone. What did I say? I'm sorry. This is the one at the preserve. I apologize. It's a little bit more protected. Obviously, I think this is probably state land too. This is that mountain behind us, right? And this is a sort of a swale, a barranca that comes down out of the mountain. That's a drainage area. And you're further away from houses. This house is a ways away, and these are a ways away. Across the street, and there's more of a buffer zone than we have. And then one could imagine that there may be some land here that you could use for parking or something like that, but you have all the same problems. This is a little bit less than an acre site in terms of enclosed yard space in here. And you have let's go to the next slide. You have all of those same issues about, there's the dump area, and there's not a lot of space for employee parking being separated from equipment parking, and all of this. Here's a big truck trying to deliver some fuel to the fueling station here. There's sand soils bins, and there's a dump station here, a wash-off station there. you got all, and this is a really temporary structure here at the end that really just ought to probably be replaced. You guys, a lot of you have taken the tour and have seen this personally, so you know what we're facing in these areas. They just, you could spend a lot of money, and there, you could, another option for these facilities is you could do a structured facility in these areas where you have two different levels. So you have a lower level and an upper level, and you drive up onto a parking deck type structure so that you can stack in this same area. But that's everything we're talking about is an expensive solution. So in a way, you sort of have to just sort of look at these areas and say, well, I don't see, it'd be wonderful if we had a 4-acre site somewhere that was just sitting there waiting for us to put a maintenance facility on it, but nobody's given me that, shown me that on the site yet. So let's go to the next slide. These are just, you can see what they're talking about here is adding a building, or really not even a building, that's just a cover. Like you were talking, like a cover for the pool, there's a cover here, 2,000 square feet, some covered parking over here. I think there's an addition to the building there, which would be a new addition, and then maybe some renovation to the existing building. So there are things that you could do to improve the existing, and this is sort of where the executive committee or whoever did this got to with how could we improve it, and these are not, I would say these are not long-term solutions, but they would definitely make things better. Go to the next slide. These are just blow-ups of that. Really, that's basically we can sort of go back to thank you. Those are just blow-ups of how this is too detailed for us really to worry about where the offices are and all that kind of stuff. Any questions about where we are with that, though? Or Kevin, anything you wanted to say?
So, if you go back to the one at the Preserve the Maintenance Facility, what's a dollar estimate on that?
Don't know yet.
Don't know yet.
Haven't done it. I'll do it for the next meeting, before the next meeting.
In terms of, and I come from public schools, people's residents' money, but big-time money.
Right.
And when we did budgets, we just said, this is what we can afford.
Mm-hmm.
What can you do? That is a whole different way than saying, open up the draft plan, design it, and then tell us the bill, okay? So I would like your expertise on, there's two ways to do this. One is an open checkbook, which probably won't fly. No, and one is an internal discussion about, here's the budget, tell us what you can do.
So, and actually there's sort of a third way, or maybe different than what you're talking about, was first you get all of this stuff designed in a plan. You lay it all out. Once you have it all laid out, then you say, okay, well, what are those phases going to be? And those phases are based on, there's really three-legged stool before we go and talk to the whole community together and have a cogent presentation. We have to have all three legs determined. And that is, what do we want to do, which is plans and renderings and all that kind of stuff that show what we want to do. The second is, how much does that cost? And then the third leg of that is, how much does it cost me? How are we going to fund it? And until you have that funding solution, you don't have a plan. You just don't. And we don't have a funding solution, and we don't have a cost yet. And you can't get to a funding. You can't get to how much it costs until you have a plan. Once you have a plan, you can get to how much it costs. Once you have how much it costs, you can get to a funding solution based on how many things you put together into a plan. Does that see what I'm saying? It's not either of the options you said. It's sort of a third way to get there, because you might have a much longer, maybe not longer time horizon than a school district, but you have a longer time horizon than a lot of what we think about personally. You've got a forever time horizon here as a community that owns itself and is self-governed and all that kind of stuff. So you can be thinking on the 20 and 30-year time scale about, well, once we make that improvement, we want to make sure it's done for the next 30 years so we don't have to come back and do it again. And lets us, once we have a project and we know we've done it right, lets us mark that off and say, that is done. Let's move on to the next one, that kind of thing. And so our whole goal is to make sure when we're thinking about it, that the plan shows how we can do it right, and then we can address, well, what does that really mean in terms of funding and cost and all that kind of stuff. But the three legs have to be there, or we're going to fall off our stool. We won't be able to communicate it to anybody.
So, as you go forth and continue to look at this, as we were talking earlier today, the cost discussions that you're gonna spend some time on over the next month will really, you expect them to be some fairly broad ranges because we don't have details. But it's kind of like, well, the low end, some Band-Aid budgets might look like this. Some Taj Mahal stuff might look like this. And to our point, well, we're thinking we're kind of in this little band right in here, we think, but we really don't know. But that's kind of in our mind where we think we're going to be. How do we, and I think we're all going to suffer from sticker shock because as soon as we start talking about, 5 years from now, well, I don't know if anybody's bought a car and one was 5 years ago and one was yesterday, but I got sticker shock, and I'm sure that that's what your numbers are going to come back and kind of tell us is historically I've escalated this number for 5 years from now, and all our eyes are going to go like this, and we're going to go, okay, so what does that mean? But that's the conversation, right?
And that was the question I was going to ask is what are you doing as far as building and construction escalation at like 5-year increments out 30 years or 50 years? What kind of window are you giving us?
Well, usually it's a little different than the way you're thinking about it, Dan. Is usually we try to do it in today's dollars, or thinking about if we were build it a couple of years from now. Like if we were ready to go in a couple of years from now, we'll do it because I don't know what inflation is going to be over the next 5 years, and none of us in this room do, or we wouldn't be sitting in this room, right? We'd be relaxing on the Riviera if we knew what inflation was going to do, because we would take advantage of that personally. But so we don't know. And there's no way for us to know, but we can provide relative values based in what we think today's dollars are, and we can know almost without fail that over my entire practice, everything has gotten more expensive over time. There's been no period in my practice, even in the recessions and things like that, where we've seen dramatic reductions in cost of building things. So, but our real job is to start prioritizing, right? To think about how things get prioritized. And the best way to prioritize is within a framework of ultimately the best way to prioritize is with a framework of what things cost. And they have to, basically, if you're in today's relative dollars, you know that, okay, well, if that's the highest priority project, and that's, say, a $2 million project. We've got a $2 million project, and that's the highest priority things that we want to do. Then maybe we have $10 million of other work that needs to be done. I'm just making these numbers up. They don't have any relation to reality here. But we know that if out of our $12 million project, this $2 million is the first thing we're going to do. We know without a doubt that if it's 5 years from now that we do our next tranche of projects, and that would have been $2 million this year, 5 years from now, that's $3 or $4 million. It's just going to happen. So we don't know what that's going to be. So I think the easiest way to talk about it is in relative today's dollars as best as we can to understand relative to what today's dollars are. And then we can decide together if we want to put an inflation factor on that. The inflation factor is relative to phasing, how long it's going to take us to do it, all of those kinds of things.
Yeah, and again, I think in some ways it's outside of our scope of work as it is, right? If you do it in today's dollars and you do that universally across the board,
right,
well, that helps us decide what we're hearing